The antique velvet settee in Marcus Thorne's private gallery cost $85,000. It was handcrafted in 1847 by Italian artisans who spent 3 years selecting the perfect materials. The velvet was dyed with pigments extracted from crushed beetles and rare flowers. The wooden frame was carved from a single piece of mahogany that had been aging in a Florentine warehouse for half a century. Collectors had offered Marcus triple its value. Museums had begged to display it. He had refused every offer because that settee had belonged to his mother, and it was the last place she had sat before the fire took her from him forever. Zara Mitchell didn't know any of this when her exhausted body collapsed onto it at 4:02 in the morning. She had been awake for 37 hours straight. Her shift at the bakery had started at 4 a.m. the previous day, then the catering job from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., then straight to Sterling Security Services for her overnight rotation at the Thorne Art Conservatory. Her ankles were swollen to twice their normal size. Her lower back screamed with every breath she took. Her eyes burned with a fatigue that had become her constant companion over the past 11 days. Just 5 minutes, she told herself, as her body melted into the surprisingly soft cushions. Nobody visits the private collection this late anyway. I just need to rest my eyes for 5 minutes, and then I will finish my rounds. She was wrong. The hidden elevator behind the Renaissance tapestry opened with a whisper so soft that Zara never heard it. Marcus Thorne stepped into the darkness of his sanctuary, his 6'4" frame moving with the precise grace of a man who controlled every aspect of his existence. He had not slept in 3 days. The insomnia was getting worse again, and the only thing that calmed his racing mind was walking through his galleries at night, checking that everything was exactly where it should be. The Boston Harbor glittered through the curved windows, painting silver patterns across the marble floors. Marcus reached for the dimmer switch, adjusting the lighting to exactly 47%. That was his preferred level. Not 46, not 48, exactly 47%, because that was the percentage of light that had been filtering through his childhood bedroom window on the last peaceful night of his life, before the fire, before the screaming, before everything that made him who he was today. He froze. There she was, a woman curled on his mother's settee, her security uniform wrinkled, her natural hair escaping its professional bun in soft coils around her face, her chest rising and falling with the deep rhythm of exhausted sleep. Her radio sat abandoned on the floor beside her, along with a half-eaten granola bar and a worn paperback book with a cracked spine. For a long moment, Marcus simply stared. His heart was pounding so hard, he could hear it echoing off the gallery walls. His hands trembled inside his leather gloves. His throat constricted with a feeling he could not name, something between rage and something else entirely, something that felt almost like recognition. No one had been in this room in 12 years. He had sealed it after his mother's death, had forbidden any staff from entering, had installed 17 different security measures to ensure that his sanctuary remained untouched by human presence. And now this woman, this stranger, had somehow bypassed everything and fallen asleep on the most precious piece of furniture he owned. His personal assistant Vivian materialized at his shoulder like she always did. She had been with him for 7 years, and she had learned to appear only when necessary and to disappear the moment she was no longer needed. "Sir," she whispered, "I will have her removed immediately and contact the security company. This is completely unacceptable. I will ensure she is terminated by morning." No. The word escaped Marcus's lips before he could stop it. Vivian's composure cracked for the first time in 7 years. Everyone who worked for Marcus Thorne knew about his obsessive need for solitude, for control, for the preservation of his spaces. The man wore white cotton gloves when handling anything in his collection. He had the gallery's air filtration system customized to hospital-grade specifications. He had once terminated a contract with a renowned art dealer for touching a sculpture without permission. He had fired a security guard for breathing too loudly near a painting. And now he wanted to let some random security guard sleep in his mother's private sanctuary. "Sir," Vivian asked carefully, "are you certain? I can have her out of the building in under 3 minutes. No one would ever know she was here." Marcus's dark eyes never left Zara's sleeping form. Something was happening inside his chest, something he did not understand and could not control. For 12 years, he had kept this room frozen in time, a monument to his grief and his guilt. For 12 years, he had refused to let anyone enter because their presence would contaminate the memory of his mother. For 12 years, he had believed that solitude was the only thing that could keep him safe. But watching this woman sleep, watching her breathe, watching her exist in this space without fear or hesitation, something was cracking inside him. Something was shifting. Something was trying to break free. "Bring me my measuring tape," Marcus said quietly. "The brass one. From my restoration kit." "Your measuring tape, sir?" "Did I stutter, Vivian?" "The brass one, now." Vivian knew better than to question him further. "Yes, sir." She disappeared into the shadows and returned 3 minutes later with the requested item. Marcus took it without looking at her, his eyes still fixed on the sleeping woman. "Leave us," he commanded, his voice low and controlled. "Everyone out, now." The security team exchanged confused looks, but they filed into the elevator without another word. The doors closed with a soft hiss, leaving Marcus alone with the intruder, who dared to violate the only space in the world where he felt safe. He approached slowly, measuring tape held loosely in his gloved hand. Not as a weapon. Marcus Thorne had never been violent in his life. The measuring tape was a tool, a way to quantify what could not be understood, a way to impose order on the chaos that was threatening to overwhelm him. He needed to measure something, to count something, to calculate something, because that was the only way he knew how to process emotions that did not fit into neat categories. He stopped 3 feet from the settee, close enough to see the dark circles under her eyes, close enough to notice the calluses on her hands, close enough to smell the faint scent of industrial cleaner and exhaustion that clung to her uniform. She looked peaceful. That was what struck him most. In all his years of insomnia, in all his nights of wandering through empty galleries, he had forgotten what peace looked like. He had forgotten that human beings could surrender themselves to sleep without fear, without hypervigilance, without waking every 30 minutes to check that the world had not caught fire while they were unconscious. This woman had walked into his sanctuary, collapsed onto his mother's settee, and fallen into the kind of sleep that he had not experienced since he was 19 years old. Marcus reached out and pressed the cold brass measuring tape against her arm. "Wake up," he said, his voice deep and cold and vibrating with barely restrained intensity. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain yourself before I have you arrested for trespassing." Zara's eyes flew open, and her heart stopped. The first thing she saw was him, tall and lean, with dark skin and darker eyes, cheekbones that could cut glass, and a mouth set in a hard line. He wore all black, a cashmere sweater and tailored trousers and leather gloves, and he held himself with the rigid posture of someone bracing against an invisible wind. He was the most beautiful man she had ever seen. He was also clearly the most terrifying. Zara scrambled upright, her training kicking in despite her panic. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together how she had ended up here, why she had fallen asleep, how much trouble she was in. The private gallery, the open door, the settee that had felt like a cloud. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. "Mr. Thorne," she gasped, stumbling to her feet. "I am so sorry. I was conducting my checkpoint sweep and the door was open, and I just needed to sit down for 1 second, and I did not mean to fall asleep. I swear it will never happen again. Please." "You entered my private gallery without authorization." Marcus's voice cut through her, rambling like a blade through silk. "You touched my furniture. You fell asleep. That is 3 termination-worthy offenses in a single sentence." "Please," Zara said, and the word came out broken, desperate, nothing like the composed professional she had trained herself to be. "Please do not fire me. I know I violated protocol. I know there is no excuse, but I need this job. My brother is sick. He has cancer. He is dying, and I need the money for his treatment, and I will do anything. I swear I will work harder. I will never sit down again. I will—" "Everyone has a sob story," Marcus interrupted coldly. He walked around to the far side of the gallery, giving Zara a wide berth she noticed, and reached for his phone. "Yours does not interest me. I am calling Sterling Security right now. You will be escorted from the building, and your employment will be terminated effective immediately." Zara did something stupid then, something desperate, something that would change both their lives forever. She lunged forward and grabbed his wrist before he could pick up the phone. "Please," she begged, her fingers closing around his arm. "Please just listen to me for one." The world exploded, not with pain, not with violence. The world exploded with a jolt of pure electricity that shot up Zara's arm and straight through her entire body. It was like touching a live wire, but instead of hurting, It sent pleasant tingles everywhere, a warm, shocking current that made her gasp and let go instantly. Marcus recoiled like she had burned him. His whole body jerked backward with such force that his elbow caught the edge of a display case. A priceless vase teetered on its pedestal. Time seemed to slow as they both watched it wobble, 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 and then settle back into place. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Zara stared at her own hand, her mind reeling from the strange, overwhelming sensation she had just felt. It was like every nerve ending in her body had woken up simultaneously. It was like being struck by lightning and surviving. It was like nothing she had ever experienced in her 27 years of life. Marcus stared at his wrists where she had touched him, even through his glove, even through the leather barrier he wore specifically to prevent skin-to-skin contact. He had felt it too. His face was twisted in something between shock and something else entirely, something that looked almost like astonishment, something that looked almost like wonder. "What was that?" Zara whispered. Marcus did not answer. He was still staring at his wrist, his chest heaving, his carefully controlled composure completely shattered. What Marcus does next will completely change everything you think you know about this story. But to understand why this moment matters, we need to go back 6 days to the hospital room where Zara's entire world was falling apart. If you are already invested in finding out what happens next, take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this story unfolds, because what happens between these two people is going to take you on an emotional journey you will never forget. Now, let us rewind to where it all began. 6 days earlier, the fluorescent lights of Boston General Hospital buzzed with a frequency that had become the soundtrack of Zara's nightmares. She sat in the hallway outside the oncology wing, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of cold coffee, staring at a crack in the linoleum floor that looked like a lightning bolt. Her younger brother Darius was 23 years old. 2 years ago, he had been accepted to MIT's engineering program on a full scholarship. He had been the first person in their family to attend college. He had been the reason Zara worked 3 jobs, the reason she had dropped out of her own community college program, the reason she sacrificed everything without a second thought. Darius was supposed to be changing the world. He was supposed to be building bridges and designing buildings and proving that 2 kids from the foster care system could make something of themselves. He was not supposed to be lying in a hospital bed with tubes running in and out of his body while aggressive lymphoma tried to steal his future. Zara took a sip of her cold coffee and grimaced. It tasted like despair. It tasted like the past 18 months of watching her brother fight a battle he had not asked for and might not win. It tasted like fear and exhaustion, and the kind of love that breaks you even as it keeps you going. "Miss Mitchell?" Zara looked up to find Dr. Okafor standing in front of her. The oncologist was a tall woman with graying locks and kind eyes that always seemed to carry the weight of difficult news. She had been treating Darius since his diagnosis, and over the past 18 months, she and Zara had developed the kind of relationship that exists only between doctors and the family members who haunt their hallways. "Dr. Okafor," Zara said, rising to her feet so quickly that coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup. "How is he? The latest scans, did they show improvement?" "Please tell me they showed improvement." Dr. Okafor's expression was complicated. There was hope there, but it was tempered by something else, something that made Zara's stomach clench. "The cancer is responding to treatment," Dr. Okafor said carefully, "but we need to move faster. There is an experimental protocol at Johns Hopkins that is showing remarkable results for cases like your brother's. It combines targeted immunotherapy with a new radiation technique that we simply cannot offer here at Boston General. That is good, right?" Zara's voice cracked with desperate hope. "That is more than good. That is amazing. When can he start? How soon can we transfer him?" Dr. Okafor held up a hand, and the hope that had been blooming in Zara's chest withered instantly. For patients in Darius's demographic, young, otherwise healthy, early-stage lymphoma, the success rate at Johns Hopkins is over 80%, but the program is expensive, and it is not covered by insurance. The hospital requires payment up front before they will accept him into the program. Zara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. How much? The total program cost is $340,000. They need at least half, $170,000, before they will schedule his admission, and we need to move within the next 3 weeks. or we risk losing the window of opportunity that his current treatment has created. $170,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Zara's mind went completely blank. She made $14 an hour at the bakery, $16 at the catering company, $18 at the security firm. Even working 80 hours a week, even skipping meals and taking cold showers and cutting every possible expense, she was lucky to clear $3,000 a month after rent and her brother's current medical bills. $170,000. Might as well have been $170 million. I do not have that kind of money, Zara whispered, the words barely audible. I do not have anything close to that kind of money. There has to be another option. Financial aid, payment plans, something, anything. I understand, Dr. Okafor said gently, and I want you to know that I'm going to do everything in my power to help you explore those options. But Zara, she paused, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine compassion beneath. Your brother is a fighter. He is young and strong and determined. If we can get him into this program, he has a real chance at a full recovery. Please, explore every option. Do not give up. After Dr. Okafor left, Zara sank back into her plastic chair. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The crack in the linoleum seemed to grow larger, swallowing her whole. $170,000. 3 weeks. The equation was impossible. The math did not work. The situation had no solution. Zara put her head in her hands and let herself fall apart. It was the ugly kind of crying, the kind where snot runs down your face and your chest heaves so hard you cannot catch your breath, the kind where sounds escape your throat that do not seem human, the kind of crying you only allow yourself when you are truly, completely alone. Except she was not alone. Girl, I could hear you from the elevator. What in the world is going on? Zara looked up through blurry eyes to find her best friend Monique dropping into the chair beside her. Monique was 5 feet of fierce energy with box braids down to her waist and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that had gotten them both through foster care together 15 years ago. They had been placed in the same group home when Zara was 12 and Monique was 11, and they had been inseparable ever since. Mo! Zara gasped, trying and failing to compose herself. What are you doing here? Monique gave her a look that clearly communicated. She thought that was the stupidest question ever asked. Your text said, Hospital, Darius. Bad news. What did you think I was going to do? Stay home and watch reality TV while my best friend falls apart? Now tell me what happened. Zara explained everything. The experimental treatment at Johns Hopkins, the 80% success rate, the impossible price tag, the 3-week deadline that felt like a noose tightening around her throat with every passing second. Monique was quiet for a long moment. Her face went through several expressions, shock and anger and determination and something that looked like fear. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and firm. How many jobs are you working right now? 3, Zara said. Morning shift at the bakery, afternoon catering gigs, overnight security at the art conservatory. That is not enough. You need more. Zara let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. More? Mo, I am already sleeping 4 hours a night. I cannot remember the last time I ate a meal sitting down. Where exactly am I supposed to find another job? I do not know, but you are going to figure it out. Monique was not being cruel. She was being real, which was what Zara needed. She had never been the type of friend who offered empty comfort or pretty lies. She was the type of friend who told you the hard truth and then helped you fight through it. Look, Monique continued, reaching into her purse and pulling out her phone. My cousin Tamara works for this high-end security company that services all the fancy galleries and private collections in Back Bay. The pay is ridiculous because rich people are paranoid about their art getting stolen, and she told me they are desperate for people right now because one of their biggest clients just expanded and nobody can handle him. What do you mean nobody can handle him? I mean this billionaire art collector is apparently the most demanding, particular, impossible human being on the planet. Tamara says he has OCD or something. Everything has to be exactly perfect. He has fired people for breathing too loud, for walking in the wrong pattern, for looking at paintings the wrong way. Nobody lasts more than a month working for him. Zara frowned. Why would I want a job that nobody can keep? Because the impossible jobs pay the most. Monique pulled up a contact in her phone. Tamara says this guy pays his security staff $45 an hour plus overtime. And there is always overtime because he has weird hours and inspects everything personally. $45 an hour. Zara's mind raced with calculations. If she could land that job and keep her bakery shifts and pick up weekend catering gigs, she could maybe, possibly, potentially start making a dent in that impossible number. What is the catch? She asked. The catch is that Marcus Thorne is apparently the definition of difficult. He has not let anyone into his private gallery in over a decade. He has cameras everywhere, monitors everything, reviews security footage every single day. He has terminated contracts with 8 different security companies in the past 5 years because none of them could meet his standards. Tamra says working for him is like being watched by a ghost who might fire you for having a heartbeat. I can be invisible, Zara said, straightening in her chair. I can follow protocols. I can be whatever he needs me to be. Zara, I am serious. Monique grabbed her hand. This man is intense. Tamara has seen grown men cry after dealing with him. Are you sure you can handle that? Zara thought about Darius, about the way his laugh used to fill their tiny apartment before he got sick, about the way he still tried to joke with the nurses even when the chemo made him so weak he could barely lift his head, about the MIT scholarship letter he had framed and hung above his hospital bed as motivation to keep fighting. I have watched my baby brother fight cancer for 18 months, Zara said quietly. I can handle intense. Send me Tamra's number. Zara's interview at Sterling Security Services took place 3 days later in a sleek office overlooking Boston Harbor. The walls were lined with photographs of impressive properties, mansions and museums and corporate headquarters, all protected by the company's elite security teams. Director Walsh was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a precise bob, and the kind of posture that suggested military training. She studied Zara's resume with an expression that gave nothing away. 3 jobs, she said finally. No gaps in employment for 8 years. Not a single complaint or disciplinary issue. She looked up, her eyes assessing. You are either a saint or you are hiding something. Which is it? Neither, ma'am. Zara replied steadily. I just cannot afford to make mistakes. Director Walsh nodded slowly. Tell me why you want the Thorne account specifically. Most people run the other way when they hear his name. I understand he has high standards. I have high standards too, and I need the money. For your brother, Director Walsh said. It was not a question. Zara's eyebrows rose. I do my research on all potential employees. I know about Darius. I know about the experimental treatment. I know you are desperate. Zara felt her defenses rise. Is that going to be a problem? No. Director Walsh leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. In fact, it might be the only thing that qualifies you for this position. Let me be honest with you, Miss Mitchell. Marcus Thorne is not just difficult. He is impossible. He has requirements about everything. How you walk, where you stand, what time you complete each checkpoint. He reviews the security footage personally every morning and calls me directly if anything is off by so much as 30 seconds. I can follow instructions. Can you? Director Walsh pulled out a thick binder and slid it across the desk. This is the Thorne Protocol Manual, 200 pages of specific requirements for securing his property. Everything from the exact angle you hold your flashlight to the precise route you must follow on each floor. Miss him a spot, you are terminated. Deviate from the route, you are terminated. Make eye contact with any artwork for longer than 3 seconds, believe it or not, terminated. Zara stared at the binder. 200 pages of rules. 200 pages of ways to fail. 200 pages standing between her and $45 an hour. She reached out and took the binder. When do I start? Director Walsh almost smiled. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You will be the only guard on duty for the private collection floors. Mr. Thorne does not like multiple people in his space. You will have 8 hours to complete your rounds, maintain security, and not disturb a single molecule of air. Can you handle that? Yes, ma'am. We will see. Director Walsh stood, signaling the end of the interview. One more thing, Miss Mitchell. The last guard who worked his overnight shift quit after 3 weeks. She said working for Marcus Thorne felt like being watched by a ghost who was waiting for her to make a mistake so he could fire her soul. Are you sure you want to do this? Zara thought about $170,000. She thought about 3 weeks. She thought about Darius lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life while she fought to give him a chance. "I am sure," she said, "I can handle ghosts." Zara has no idea that in less than 48 hours, she is going to violate every single rule Marcus Thorne has ever created. And in doing so, she is going to crack open a door that has been sealed for over a decade. What is behind that door will change both their lives forever. But before we get there, drop a comment right now and tell me this. Have you ever been so exhausted that you made a mistake that actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise? I want to hear your stories. The Thorne Art Conservatory was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. From the outside, it looked like a converted warehouse. Brick and industrial, unremarkable, the kind of building you would walk past 1,000 times without giving it a second thought. But inside, it was a cathedral of light and beauty. 5 floors of galleries housing one of the most impressive private art collections in America. Zara stood in the entrance on her first night, neck craned back, trying to take it all in. The ceiling soared 30 feet above her head. The walls were hung with paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Sculptures stood on pedestals throughout the space, illuminated by carefully positioned spotlights that made them seem to glow from within. And everywhere she could feel the presence of Marcus Thorne. Not physically. She had still never seen him in person, but his influence was visible in every detail. The temperature maintained at exactly 68 degrees. The humidity controlled to 45%. The lighting calibrated to specific levels in each room. Everything was perfect. Everything was precise. Everything whispered of a man who needed to control his environment because he could not control whatever chaos raged inside him. Her first week was disorienting. The protocols were exactly as strict as Director Walsh had warned. Specific routes, specific timing, specific ways of holding her flashlight to avoid casting shadows on the artwork. Zara learned that Marcus Thorne had sensors that could detect temperature fluctuations of a single degree, humidity monitors accurate to the decimal point, cameras so high definition that he could count the threads on her uniform from his private monitoring room. She also learned that despite all his surveillance, she never actually saw him. He was a ghost who left traces everywhere but never appeared in person. Adjustments to lighting that were made overnight. So subtle, she only noticed them because she studied each room obsessively. Notes to the day staff about infinitesimal imperfections, a sculpture rotated 2 degrees off-center, a frame hanging 1 millimeter too low, changes to security protocols that arrived via email at 3 in the morning, sent from an account that never received replies. By the end of her first week, Zara felt like she was working for a phantom, a presence that watched everything and revealed nothing, a mind that noticed every detail but remained completely unknowable. She should have been terrified. She should have been counting down the days until she could quit like everyone else. But instead, she found herself fascinated. Who was Marcus Thorne? What had made him this way? What was he hiding behind all those cameras and protocols and precisely calibrated environments? She would find out soon enough, but not in the way she expected. By day 11, Zara was running on fumes. Bakery shift from 4 a.m. to noon. Catering from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Security from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 4 hours of sleep if she was lucky, and she had not been lucky in weeks. Her body was breaking down in ways she tried to ignore. Swollen ankles, constant headaches, a tremor in her hands that made holding her flashlight difficult, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But every time she thought about quitting, she thought about Darius, about the experimental treatment, about the 18 days left until the deadline, about the $15,000 she had managed to scrape together, which sounded like a lot until she remembered she needed $170,000. She was not going to quit. She could not quit. She would work herself into the ground, if that was what it took to give her brother a chance. That was the mindset she was in when she arrived at the conservatory on night 11, exhausted beyond measure, running on caffeine and determination, her body screaming for rest, while her mind refused to listen. Her checkpoint required her to verify that all access points on each floor were secured. She had done this 11 times before. She knew the route by heart. She knew exactly which doors should be locked and which should be open and which should be somewhere in between. The private gallery on the 5th floor was supposed to be off limits to all staff. The door was supposed to be sealed with a biometric lock that only Marcus Thorne could open. She had walked past it 11 times without giving it a second thought. But tonight, the door was open, just a crack, just a sliver of light spilling out into the darkened hallway. Zara's training told her to radio it in, report the anomaly, wait for instructions. Do not, under any circumstances, enter a restricted area without explicit authorization. But she was so tired, so very, very tired. And some part of her brain, the part that was too exhausted to make good decisions, told her that she needed to verify the door was secure. That was part of her job, right? Verifying security. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. And then she stopped breathing. The space was smaller than the public galleries, more intimate, more personal. The artwork here was different too. Not the museum-quality masterpieces on display downstairs, but something more eclectic, more meaningful. A child's drawing in a gilded frame, stick figures holding hands in front of a house, the word family written in crayon across the top, photographs of a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, laughing in one picture, playing a violin in another, embracing a young boy who must have been Marcus in a third, abstract sculptures that seemed to pulse with emotion, grief and love and longing frozen in bronze and marble. And in the center of it all, positioned in front of a curved window that framed the harbor like a living painting, was a settee. Antique velvet, the color of deep wine, exactly the kind of furniture that belonged in a museum rather than someone's private collection. Zara knew she should leave. Every protocol, every warning, every instinct screamed at her to turn around and walk away. This was clearly a sacred space, a shrine to someone Marcus Thorne had lost. She had no business being here, but her legs would not cooperate. They were shaking so badly they threatened to buckle. Her vision was blurring at the edges, darkness creeping in like a slow tide. She had not eaten since noon the previous day, and that had been half a sandwich grabbed between catering setups. Just 5 minutes, she told herself. Just a moment to rest before I finish my rounds. I will sit for 5 minutes, and then I will leave, and no one will ever know I was here. She sank onto the settee, and it was like coming home to a place she had never been. The velvet was impossibly soft against her aching body. The cushions seemed to mold themselves to her exhausted frame. Through the curved window, the harbor glittered like scattered diamonds under a half moon, and the peace of the scene seeped into her bones. Zara closed her eyes. Just 5 minutes. The cold brass of a measuring tape pressed against her arm, and the voice that accompanied it was deep and controlled, and absolutely terrifying. Wake up. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain yourself before I have you arrested for trespassing. Zara's eyes flew open, and she found herself staring up at the face of Marcus Thorne. He was beautiful. That was her first, completely inappropriate thought, given the circumstances. Tall and lean, with dark brown skin and darker eyes, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wore all black cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, and his hands were encased in black leather gloves. He was also clearly furious. Zara scrambled to her feet so fast she nearly fell over. Her heart was pounding. Her palms were sweating. Every cell in her body was screaming that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. "Mr. Thorne," she gasped, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I am so sorry. I was doing my checkpoint sweep, and the door was open, and I just needed to sit down for 1 second. I did not mean to fall asleep. It will never happen again. Please, I know I violated protocol, but please do not. You entered my private gallery without authorization." His voice was ice, cold and sharp and completely devoid of warmth. "You touched my furniture. You fell asleep. That is 3 termination-worthy offenses in a single sentence, Miss Mitchell." The fact that he knew her name somehow made it worse. Of course he knew her name. He reviewed everything. He watched everything. He probably knew her social security number and her blood type, and exactly how much money she owed various medical facilities. "Please," Zara said, and she hated how desperate she sounded, but desperation was the only thing she had left. "Please do not fire me. My brother is sick. He has cancer. He needs an experimental treatment that costs more money than I will ever see in my lifetime, and this job is the only chance I have to save him. I will work harder. I will never sit down again. I will follow every protocol perfectly from now on. Please, just give me one more chance." Marcus Thorne looked at her with those cold, dark eyes, and she watched him process her plea, watched him weigh her desperation against his need for order, watched him calculate the disruption she had caused against the inconvenience of finding a replacement. "Everyone has a sob story," he said finally. "Yours does not interest me." He turned away from her and reached for his phone on a nearby table. "I am calling Sterling Security right now. You will be escorted from the building, and your employment will be terminated effective immediately." Something inside Zara snapped. Later, she would not be able to explain what possessed her. Later, she would look back on this moment and wonder what cosmic force had taken control of her body. But in that instant, watching the last chance she had to save her brother slip through her fingers, she stopped thinking and simply acted. She lunged forward and grabbed his wrist. "Please," she begged, her fingers closing around his arm. "Please, just listen to—" And then the world exploded. It was not pain. It was not violence. It was electricity, pure and overwhelming, shooting up her arm and through her entire body like she had grabbed a live wire. But instead of hurting, it felt incredible, warm and shocking and intensely, overwhelmingly alive. Zara gasped and let go instantly. Marcus recoiled so violently that he knocked into the table behind him. The phone went flying, skidding across the marble floor and coming to rest against the base of a sculpture. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other, both breathing hard, both trying to process what had just happened. "What was that?" Zara whispered. Marcus did not answer. He was staring at his wrist where she had touched him. Even through his leather glove, he had felt it. Whatever it was, that impossible electric connection that had short-circuited both their brains. 12 years, he said finally, his voice strange and distant. 12 years, and no one has touched me. Not a handshake, not a pat on the back, nothing. I did not mean to. I know you did not mean to. That is not the point. He finally looked up at her, and something had changed in his eyes. The cold fury was still there, but it was mixed with something else now, something that looked almost like wonder, something that looked almost like fear. "The point is that I felt it, through my glove, through the barrier I wear specifically to prevent this exact situation." "I do not understand," Zara said. "Felt what? What are you talking about?" Marcus studied her for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His hands were clenched at his sides. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to step back to safety or leap into the unknown. "I have a condition," he said finally. "Obsessive-compulsive disorder, germophobia, severe touch aversion. Call it whatever clinical term makes you comfortable. The result is that I cannot tolerate physical contact with other human beings. The texture of skin against skin is unbearable to me. It has been this way since I was 19 years old. Since the fire," Zara said softly. Marcus flinched like she had slapped him. "What do you know about the fire?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just what I saw in this room. The photographs of the woman with the violin. The way everything here feels like a memorial. I put it together. You put it together." His voice was bitter. "How clever of you. I am sorry. I should not have come in here. I should not have touched your things. I definitely should not have grabbed your arm. If you want to fire me, I understand. I will leave quietly." She started to turn away, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." Zara turned back. Marcus was still standing there, still rigid, still visibly uncomfortable with her presence in his space. But something had shifted in his expression. The fury had faded, replaced by something more complex, something almost like curiosity. "You said your brother has cancer," he said slowly. "How much do you need for his treatment?" $170,000. The words came out flat and hopeless. "Half up front for Johns Hopkins to accept him into the experimental program. I have managed to save about $15,000. I need the rest in less than 3 weeks." Marcus nodded, processing this information. "And your brother, how old is he?" 23. He was at MIT on a full scholarship before he got sick. Engineering. He wanted to design bridges. He wanted to build things that would last. "MIT," Marcus repeated. "Impressive. He is brilliant." Zara felt tears prick her eyes, but she forced them back. "He is the smartest person I know, and the kindest, And he is lying in a hospital bed right now, fighting for his life, while I am standing here losing the only job that might give him a chance. So, if you are going to fire me, please just do it quickly." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. His eyes never left her face. His expression was unreadable. "I am not going to fire you," he said. Zara blinked. "What?" "I said, I am not going to fire you. Despite the protocol violations, despite the unauthorized entry, despite the fact that you fell asleep on my mother's settee and touched me without permission. Why?" The question escaped before Zara could stop it. "Why would you let me stay?" Marcus walked to the curved window and stared out at the harbor. His reflection was ghostly in the glass, barely visible against the glittering lights of the city. "Because when you grabbed my arm," he said quietly, "I felt something I have not felt in 12 years. Connection. Through all my barriers, through all my defenses, your touch somehow bypassed everything. I do not understand what that means, neither do I. But I intend to find out." He turned back to face her. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Mitchell, one that could solve both our problems." "What kind of proposition?" Marcus was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "In my mother's music room," he said, "there is a collection of antique instruments, violins, violas, cellos. They were damaged in the fire that killed her. I have been unable to touch them since, unable to look at them, unable to begin the restoration process that would bring them back to life. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need help." The words seemed to cause him physical pain. "I need someone to assist me with the restoration, someone who can handle the instruments while I direct the work, someone who can be in my space without overwhelming me." He paused. "Someone whose touch I can apparently feel through leather gloves, which suggests something I do not yet understand. You want me to help you restore your mother's instruments?" "Yes. In exchange, I will pay your brother's medical bills. All of them." Zara stopped breathing. "All of them? That is $170,000. I know what it is. I can afford it. The question is whether you are willing to do the work." "What exactly would I be doing?" "Learning restoration techniques, under my supervision, handling materials and tools, being present in my space for extended periods. It will be demanding work, detailed, precise, and I am, as I am sure you have noticed, a demanding person to work for." Zara's mind was racing. This was insane. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life. Billionaires did not offer to pay 6 figures for some random security guard to help them restore old violins. And yet, here she was, standing in a private gallery at 4 in the morning, being offered exactly what she needed by the most impossible man she had ever met. "Why me?" she asked. "You have never met me before tonight. I violated your protocols. I fell asleep on your furniture. I grabbed you without permission. Why would you trust me with something this important?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Because you did not flinch," he said finally. "When you saw me, you did not look at me with pity or fear, or the desperate desire to escape that I see in everyone else. You looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. I find that refreshing. I look at everything like it is a problem to be solved. It is how I have survived. I know." He almost smiled. "That is why I think this might work." Zara took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding. Her mind was screaming that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch, that no one offered $170,000 without wanting something impossible in return. But she thought about Darius, about the 3 weeks she had left, about the 18 days that were ticking away while she stood here second-guessing the only lifeline she had been thrown. "Okay," she said, "I will do it." Marcus nodded, his expression unchanged. "Good. Be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The restoration begins at dawn." He turned and walked toward the hidden elevator, leaving Zara alone in the private gallery with the velvet settee and the photographs of his mother and the weight of an agreement that was going to change everything. What Marcus and Zara do not know yet is that this arrangement is going to become so much more than a business transaction. Before I continue, I want you to pause right now and hit that like button if you believe that sometimes the people who seem the most put together are actually the most broken inside. And make sure you are subscribed, because what happens next between these two people is going to surprise you in ways you cannot imagine. The next morning, Zara arrived at the Thorn Art Conservatory at exactly 7:58 a.m. She had slept for 2 hours after leaving the gallery, her mind too wired to rest properly. She had changed out of her security uniform and into the most professional outfit she owned. A simple black dress she had bought at Goodwill 3 years ago for job interviews. She had done her hair. She had taken a shower. She had tried to make herself look like someone who deserved $170,000. Looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, she had not been convinced, but she had shown up anyway. Marcus was waiting for her in the conservatory lobby. He looked exactly the same as he had the night before, immaculate and controlled and impossibly handsome in all black. The only difference was the leather gloves. Today they were brown instead of black. Zara wondered if that was significant. "You are punctual," he said by way of greeting. "Good. I despise lateness." "I was told," Zara replied. Something flickered in his eyes that might have been amusement. "Follow me." He led her through the galleries, up a flight of stairs she had not known existed, and into a part of the building she had never seen, the restoration workshop. It was a large space filled with natural light from a massive skylight overhead. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools and materials Zara could not identify. The air smelled like wood shavings and varnish and something else, something that reminded her of her grandmother's house when she was very young. And in the center of the room, arranged on padded stands, were the instruments. They were beautiful, even in their damaged state. Violins and violas and cellos, their wood scarred by smoke and water, their strings missing, their curves warped by heat. But beneath the damage, Zara could see the artistry, the careful craftsmanship, the love that had gone into creating each one. "My mother played violin professionally for 30 years, Marcus said quietly. She was principal violinist for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. These instruments were her collection. Some she inherited from her teachers. Some she purchased herself. Some were gifts from composers and conductors who admired her talent. They are beautiful," Zara said. "They were before the fire." Marcus's jaw tightened. "She kept them in her music room at our family home. She used to play for hours every evening. I would sit on the floor and listen and pretend I was somewhere else, somewhere better. What happened? The fire." His voice was flat, electrical, accidental, the kind of thing that happens without warning and destroys everything you thought you knew about the world. "I was 19, home from college for the summer. I was in the garden when it started. I saw the flames. I heard her screaming, and I could not move." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I could not move. Physically, could not make my body respond. I stood there, frozen, while my mother burned to death, less than 50 feet away from me. By the time the paralysis broke, by the time I managed to get inside, she was gone. All that was left were these," he gestured at the instruments, "damaged, broken, like me." Zara did not know what to say. The weight of his confession hung in the air between them, heavy and painful and impossibly intimate. "You blame yourself," she said finally. "It was not a question. Logically, I know it was not my fault. I did not start the fire. I did not choose to freeze. The therapists tell me it was a trauma response, something called tonic immobility, my body's way of protecting itself from a threat it could not process." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were haunted. "But logic does not matter when you wake up every night hearing your mother scream and knowing you did nothing to save her." "I am sorry," Zara said. "I cannot imagine carrying that." "No, you cannot." Marcus turned back to the instruments. "But perhaps you can help me do something about it. Perhaps, by restoring these, I can find some measure of peace." Zara looked at the damaged violins and violas and cellos. She looked at Marcus, rigid and wounded, and somehow trusting her with his deepest pain. "Where do we start?" she asked. Marcus almost smiled. "We start with this." He picked up a small brush from one of the workbenches and held it out to her. "We clean, gently, patiently, layer by layer. We remove the damage until we find what is underneath." Zara took the brush. Their fingers did not touch. Marcus was too careful for that. But she felt something pass between them anyway. Something like understanding. Something like hope. "Okay," she said, "layer by layer. Let us get to work." The next 6 weeks transformed everything. Zara learned that Marcus Thorn was indeed impossible, but not in the ways she had expected. He was demanding about precision. Every brushstroke had to be exactly right. Every layer of varnish had to dry completely before the next was applied. Every tiny repair had to be documented and photographed and analyzed before and after. He was obsessive about routine. They worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., with a 15-minute break at exactly noon and another at exactly 3:30. Lunch was always delivered at 12:15, and it was always something nutritious and protein-rich, because Marcus believed that proper brain function required proper fuel. He was terrified of physical contact. He wore his gloves constantly. He maintained a minimum distance of 3 feet from her at all times. He flinched if she moved too quickly or reached in his direction. But he was also brilliant. He knew everything about antique instruments, their history, their construction, the techniques that had been used to build them, and the techniques that could be used to repair them. He could identify the species of wood from a single glance. He could hear the tiniest imperfection in a tuning. He could see potential in a damaged piece that looked like firewood to untrained eyes. And he was funny. In unexpected moments, dry observations would slip out that made Zara laugh despite herself. He had a way of describing the art world's pretensions that was devastatingly accurate. He could imitate his mother's Boston accent with affection that made his eyes soften. Most surprisingly of all, he was kind. Small gestures revealed his care in ways his words never did. A cup of tea waiting at her workspace each morning, heated to exactly the temperature she preferred, because he had noticed she liked it slightly cooler than most people. An ergonomic chair that appeared one day without explanation, after he observed her rubbing her lower back during a long session. Her favorite jazz music playing softly through the workshop speakers, because he had heard her humming one day and had researched her musical preferences. Zara found herself looking forward to the work in a way she had not expected. Found herself thinking about Marcus during her shifts at the bakery and the catering company. Found herself wondering about his childhood, his interests, his hopes for the future beyond restoring his mother's instruments. Found herself caring about him in a way that had nothing to do with money. One evening, about 5 weeks into their arrangement, Zara was cleaning the F-holes of a particularly damaged viola when Marcus spoke unexpectedly. "You have not told me about your brother." Zara's hand stilled. She looked up to find him watching her from across the workbench. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Tell me about him." Zara put down her brush and considered. Where to start with Darius? With the small boy who had held her hand in the foster home when they were both too young to understand why their parents were gone? With the teenager who had studied until midnight every night, determined to earn his way out of poverty? With the young man who had cried when he opened his MIT acceptance letter because he thought he was dreaming? "He is my whole world," Zara said finally. "He has been since we were kids. Our mom left when I was 8 and he was 4. Our dad was not around before that. We bounced through the foster system together. Some places were okay, some were not. Through all of it, we only had each other." "That sounds lonely," Marcus said quietly. "It was, but it also made us strong. Darius and I learned early that we could not count on anyone else. We could only count on each other. That is why I work 3 jobs. That is why I am here. Because he needs me, and I will do whatever it takes to save him." Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strange, vulnerable. "My mother was my whole world, too. Before she died, she was everything. My father left when I was young. I do not remember him. It was always just the 2 of us. She taught me to love art. She taught me to find beauty in unexpected places. She taught me that control was not the same as strength." "What does that mean?" "It means that I spend my entire life trying to control everything around me. The temperature, the lighting, the position of every object in every room. I tell myself, it is because I need order. I tell myself, it is because chaos is dangerous. But the truth is, it is because I am terrified. Because the one time in my life when I truly needed to act, I froze. And my mother died because I could not make my body move." Zara set down her tools completely. "That was not your fault," she said firmly. "You were 19 years old. You saw your mother's house on fire with her inside. Your body did what bodies do in impossible situations. That is biology. That is survival instinct. That is not cowardice or failure or anything you should punish yourself for. My therapists say the same thing. Then maybe you should listen." Marcus looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. For the first time since she had met him, He looked young and scared, and desperately in need of something he could not name. "I do not know how to stop punishing myself," he admitted. "I have tried everything. Therapy, medication, meditation, every technique every expert has recommended. Nothing works. The fear is too deep. The guilt is too heavy. I am trapped in a prison of my own making, and I cannot find the door." Zara moved without thinking. She stood up from her workbench and walked toward him. She watched him tense, watched his shoulders rise, watched his gloved hands clench, but she did not stop. She stopped 3 feet away from him, the exact distance he always maintained. "Maybe the door is not something you find," she said softly. "Maybe it is something you build, one piece at a time, one day at a time, one small act of bravery at a time." "What kind of small act?" Zara slowly, deliberately removed her work gloves. She held out her bare hand, palm up. "Touch me," she said. Marcus went completely still. "What? Touch my hand, without your gloves, just for a second." "I cannot." "You can. I know you can, because I am not precious, Marcus. I am not fragile. I am not going to break because you touch me. That is not the point. The point is that I will break. Then break." Zara held his gaze. "Break, and let me help you put the pieces back together. That is what we have been doing with these instruments for weeks, cleaning away the damage, finding what is underneath. Maybe it is time to do the same thing with you." Marcus stared at her outstretched hand. His breathing was ragged. His whole body was trembling. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to find the courage to jump. "I am scared," he whispered. "I know," Zara said. "So am I." The silence stretched. The setting sun painted gold and orange across the workshop windows. The damaged instruments watched from their stands, waiting to see what their restorer would choose. Then, slowly, infinitely slowly, Marcus removed his gloves. His hands were beautiful, long-fingered and graceful, the hands of an artist, the hands of someone who had been trained to create delicate things. He stared at them for a moment, as if seeing them clearly for the first time in years. Then he reached out and touched Zara's palm. The sensation was overwhelming, electric, like before, but different this time, deeper, warmer, a current that flowed between them, connecting them in a way that transcended physical touch. Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. Marcus felt something break loose in his chest. He did not pull away. Instead, his fingers slowly, carefully interlaced with hers. Skin against skin. Connection without barriers. Trust made tangible. "Zara," he breathed, her name sounding like a prayer. "I am here. I know." His voice cracked. "For the first time in 12 years, I actually believe someone is here." They stood there for a long moment, hands intertwined, breathing together, two broken people finding something unexpected in each other, something that felt like healing, something that felt like home, something that felt like love. Darius's treatment at Johns Hopkins began the following week. Marcus paid every cent as promised, plus additional funds for accommodations and travel and every follow-up appointment the program required. He hired a private nurse to monitor Darius's progress. He arranged for the best doctors to consult on his case. He did all of this quietly, without fanfare, without expecting gratitude. Within a month, the experimental protocol was showing remarkable results. The cancer was responding. The tumor markers were dropping. For the first time in 18 months, the word remission started appearing in conversations. Within 3 months, Darius Mitchell was declared cancer-free. Zara called Marcus when she got the news. She was standing in the hospital lobby, tears streaming down her face, barely able to form words. "He made it," she sobbed. "He made it. He is going to live. Marcus, my brother is going to live." "I know," Marcus said, and his voice was warm in a way she had never heard before. "I already knew. Dr. Okafor called me an hour ago. I hope you do not mind. I asked her to keep me updated." "You have been checking on him?" "Of course I have. He is important to you, which means he is important to me." Zara cried harder. She cried for Darius and his second chance at life. She cried for Marcus and the walls he was finally learning to dismantle. She cried for herself and the future that was opening up before her, bright and full of possibility. "Thank you," she said when she could finally speak again. "Thank you for giving my brother his life back. You gave me something too, Marcus said quietly. You gave me mine. The restoration of Celeste Thorne's instruments was completed 6 months later. It had taken longer than expected. Some of the damage had been more extensive than initial assessments suggested. Some techniques had to be researched and practiced before they could be applied. Some days Marcus could not enter the workshop at all, overcome by grief and memory and the weight of what he had lost. But Zara was patient. She waited when he needed space. She pushed when he needed pushing. She held his hand, bare skin to bare skin, whenever the fear threatened to overwhelm him. And slowly, piece by piece, day by day, the instruments came back to life. The final instrument to be restored was Celeste's personal violin, the one she had played every evening while Marcus listened from the floor, the one that had survived the fire with the least damage because it had been in its case at the time, protected by velvet lining and good fortune. Marcus could not stop staring at it. It sat on its stand in the center of the workshop, gleaming under the carefully calibrated lights. Perfect. Whole, ready to make music again for the first time in 13 years. Will you play it? Zara asked softly. Marcus shook his head. I do not play. I never learned. That was always her. Then what will you do with it? I do not know. He reached out and touched the violin's curve, his bare fingers tracing the wood that his mother had touched thousands of times. I thought restoring them would bring me closure. I thought fixing what was broken would fix what is broken in me. Has it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to look at Zara, and his eyes were full of something she had never seen before. Peace. Real, genuine, hard-won peace. No, he said, the instruments did not fix me. You did. I did not do anything. You did everything. You showed me that I could touch another person without falling apart. You showed me that being vulnerable is not the same as being weak. You showed me that some things are worth the risk. He stepped closer, erasing the careful distance he had maintained for so long. You fell asleep on my mother's settee and you collapsed all my walls. I do not know how. I do not know why. But you saved me, Zara. You saved me, the same way I tried to save these instruments. Zara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I love you, she said. Because it was true, and because it was time, and because she was done pretending otherwise. Marcus smiled, the first full, genuine smile she had ever seen from him. I love you too, he said. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you sleeping in my gallery. You looked so peaceful, and I wanted, more than I have ever wanted anything, to remember what peace felt like. He pulled her into his arms then. No gloves, no barriers, no careful distance. Just two people holding each other in a workshop full of restored instruments and late afternoon light. Two people who had been broken and had found each other and had decided to be broken together because together was less lonely than alone. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? Zara murmured against his chest. You said that I reminded you of something you had forgotten. What was it? Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I told you that you reminded me humans are capable of trust, even when it costs them everything. Is that still true? No. He pulled back to look at her, his hands cupping her face, his eyes shining with emotion. Now you remind me of something else entirely. What? That humans are capable of love, even when they have forgotten how. 1 year later, Zara stood in the private gallery of the Thorne Art Conservatory, looking at the velvet settee where her life had changed forever. So much had happened since that exhausted night when she had collapsed onto an $85,000 piece of furniture and woken to find a broken billionaire standing over her. Darius had returned to MIT, healthy and determined to finish his engineering degree. The bakery and the catering company had been left behind, replaced by a position at the conservatory that Marcus had created specifically for her. Their relationship had deepened and grown and survived the challenges that came with two wounded people learning to love each other. And tonight, Marcus had brought her here with a mysterious smile and a promise that he had something to show her. Close your eyes, he said. Zara obeyed. She heard him moving around the gallery, heard the soft click of switches, heard something that might have been music starting to play. Okay, Marcus said. Open them. Zara opened her eyes and gasped. The gallery had been transformed. The velvet settee was still there, but now it was surrounded by candles, hundreds of them, their flames flickering and dancing and casting warm shadows across the walls. The photographs of Celeste had been moved to positions of honor, arranged in a circle around the room like protective spirits, and in the center of it all, on a stand draped in velvet, was Celeste's restored violin. Marcus was standing beside it, but he was not alone. A woman Zara did not recognize stood next to him, holding a bow. "This is Elena," Marcus said. "She was my mother's student, her protégée. She has not played in 13 years, not since the funeral, but she agreed to come tonight. For you, for me, for us." Marcus crossed the gallery and took Zara's hands in his. "When you fell asleep on that settee, I was furious. I thought you had violated my sanctuary. I thought you had contaminated the only place in the world where I felt safe. But I was wrong. You did not contaminate anything. You woke it up. You woke me up." "Marcus," Zara whispered, tears already forming. "Shh, let me finish." He squeezed her hands. This gallery was supposed to be a monument to grief, a place where I could freeze time and pretend that losing my mother had not destroyed me. But grief is not meant to be frozen. It is meant to be felt and moved through, and eventually transformed into something else, something like acceptance, something like peace, something like love. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Zara stopped breathing. "My mother always said that the right love finds you when you are not looking for it," Marcus said. "She said that the people who change your life are rarely the ones you expect." She was talking about my father when she said it. She was wrong about him, but she would have been right about you. He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple and beautiful, a diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the candlelight and threw rainbows across the walls. "Zara Mitchell," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You fell asleep in my chair and changed my life forever. Will you marry me?" Zara could not speak, could not think, could barely breathe. All she could do was nod, over and over, while tears streamed down her face, and Marcus slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that said everything words could not express. Behind them, Elena raised the bow to the strings of Celeste Thorne's violin, and for the first time in 13 years, music filled the gallery. If this story touched your heart, you are not alone. Sometimes the most broken people find each other exactly when they need to. Sometimes a mistake becomes a miracle. Sometimes falling asleep in the wrong place at the wrong time turns out to be exactly what you needed to wake up to a new life. If you know someone who needs to hear this message today, that healing is possible, that love finds us when we least expect it, share this video with them. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we share stories like this every week. Stories that remind us what it means to be human. Drop a comment right now and tell me what moment in this story hit you the hardest. Was it Marcus's confession about his mother? Zara's desperation to save her brother? That first moment when they touched and everything changed? I read every single comment, and I would love to hear from you, because here is what I have learned from stories like this one. The moments that change our lives are rarely the big dramatic gestures we expect. They are the small, accidental moments, the times when we are too tired to keep our walls up, the times when we reach out without thinking and find someone reaching back. Marcus Thorne built walls because he was afraid of loss, afraid of vulnerability, afraid of what might happen if he let another person close enough to hurt him. Zara Mitchell worked herself to exhaustion because she was afraid too, afraid of losing her brother, afraid of failing the only family she had, afraid of what would happen if she stopped running long enough to feel her own pain. But sometimes the universe has other plans. Sometimes it puts two broken people in the same room at 4 in the morning and watches what happens when they stop being afraid long enough to truly see each other. That is the lesson of this story. Not that love conquers all, because it does not. Not that money solves everything, because it does not. The lesson is simpler and harder than that. The lesson is that healing begins when we stop trying to do it alone. Marcus could not restore his mother's instruments by himself. He needed Zara's hands, her patience, her willingness to be present in his pain. And Zara could not save her brother by herself. She needed help. She needed to accept that accepting help was not weakness. They needed each other, and in needing each other, they found something neither of them had been looking for. They found home. So the next time you are exhausted, the next time you feel like you cannot take another step, the next time you collapse onto a metaphorical settee and wake up to find a stranger standing over you demanding explanations, remember this: that stranger might be exactly who you need. That mistake might be exactly what saves you. That moment of weakness might be the beginning of your greatest strength. Until next time, remember, your next chapter might be one accidental moment away.